Okay. Hello, Vic. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Hello, everyone. We are continuing our 2021 interview series. And today we have a very special guest with us, Vic Hao Chin. As you know, the shortest way to get to know someone is a story. So we are here to know Vic, his work, and his journey in Theosophy. Vicente Hao Chin Jr. is one of the world's most distinguished Theosophists. He is past president of both the Theosophical Society in the Philippines and the Indo-Pacific Federation of the Theosophical Society. He is the founder and chairman of the Golden Link schools in the Philippines, where Theosophy influences the curriculum. Vic, as he is popularly known, has conducted the Self-Transformation Seminar worldwide and is author of The Process of Self-Transformation and Why Meditate. He is also the chief editor of the Theosophical Digest and associate editor of the Theosophical Encyclopaedia. Vicente Hao Chin Jr. also compiled, edited, and published the chronological edition of the Mahatma Letters to AP Sinnett. So before beginning our interview, I would like to thank the team of the European School of Theosophy for their support, and also Ian Nicholas Kind, the editor of the Theosophy Forward magazine. Vic, once more welcome. It's really, truly an honor to have you here with us today. And I would like to open our interview asking you to share with us how you came in contact with Theosophy for the first time and with the Theosophical Society also.
Right. I'll just keep it simple because the details may not be of interest to people. I first encountered yoga, the practice of yoga, meditation, and I didn't know yet about the Theosophical Society. And my companion in this yogic studies referred me to a library in Manila about these things because we were all interested in reading more about these. And that library was the Theosophical Society. I've not heard about it. So immediately, the following Monday, I went there, but it was closed because it was closed on Monday. So I went there the second day and found that they have a bookstore, they have a library, they have a 3-story building. And I became interested in it. I went back and became friends with the bookshop manager and became curious about what the Theosophical Society is. And one of the things that impressed me when I started reading about the Theosophical Society was that it had complete freedom of thought. Now, this was a rare thing in my experience because prior to that, I had been going from one movement, organization, belief system to another. And practically all of them were asking me to believe in something. But as most of us know, there are many things wherein which we cannot say that I believe it. Even if we are inclined to think that it may be true, but we are not yet ready to say that we are convinced about it. And so we cannot be honest if we say that, okay, I accept it in name, but in actuality, we have inner doubts. So when the Theosophical Society, when I found that the TS was like that, I was quite impressed by it. And when I became a bit more, I became a member soon. When I became a bit more active, I saw that it was genuine. Of course, there are members who tend to be quite dogmatic, quite strong in their views, but it's personal. It's not the organization. And that was all right with me. So that's how I encountered the Theosophical Society. And when I first came into it, for some reason, I don't know how to put this. Um, it's like feeling comfortable with it. I do not know whether it's appropriate to say that I felt like coming home. Maybe that may not be a fully appropriate term, but I felt comfortable with it. There was no guru, there was no authority, there was no imposition, and that was quite comfortable with me because ever since I was young, when I was inquiring into these things, religion, about life, I became aware about the conflict of authorities, about religions, about belief systems, and I became aware that I grew up a Catholic, a Christian, and I became aware that even within Christianity, there are many things in which I felt uncomfortable with, and I wouldn't be able to say that I believed. In fact, I studied in a Catholic college, which is now a university, and I openly wrote articles about my doubts. It was very fortunate that my Jesuit professors, it was a Jesuit uh, university, were very open-minded. They did not mind. They didn't expel me. They did not put me into a hot position by expressing my doubts about doctrines. Including, I was even questioning the whole curriculum of philosophy and so on. So uh, that was very helpful, and so that's how I came into the Theosophical Society.
And this how long? How old were you at the time? I mean,
20.
20, or you are around
Yeah.
my age when I became a member also. Well, I was also studying in a Catholic school in a nuns. It was the school, it was a college, the Sacré-Cœur, and they were very rigid. And, I remember specifically one day that in the religious lesson, um, um, the teacher, we were studying that animals have no soul. And then I was very young and I protested. I said, I'm sorry, I do not agree with that. My dog has a soul. So I had quite a few problems also studying in a Catholic school in terms of dogma and dogmatism and all that. So I also agree with you that the freedom of thought is perhaps one of the main elements in the Theosophical Society, which makes it such a special organization. Um, could you now, Vic, please share with us the name of a theosophist that has inspired you, that has influenced you, but not the classical theosophists like Blavatsky, Judd, Walcott, and also someone you actually met?
Well, I would say that the person who most influenced me in or through the Theosophical Society was J. Krishnamurti.
Did you met him?
Now, I met him once,
Mm.
but it was only later that I met him. What was more important was the turning point in my life caused by reading one of his books. That book was Life Ahead. And I didn't even know who Krishnamurti was. It was just, the book was just shown to me by the librarian. He said, have you read this book? I said, no. You go ahead and read it. And I brought it to my dormitory, read it, and I wasn't even finished with the book. It was a small book, the book Life Ahead. It was a small book, and I was not even halfway. I forgot where it was, but I closed the book. And during that time, I was subject to severe depression. I was like lost in terms of about what is the direction of my life. And I was taking up my master's degree in economics, and yet my interest was not in economics. In fact, later I gave it up. And and when I read that book, I closed it, and then suddenly I realized there was a clarity which changed the course of my life from then on. And it wasn't just simply an insight on things, but it had a very practical outcome. One of the things that, there are two things that I'd like to mention coming from that book alone. But later, of course, I read more of his books, but on that book alone, two things. One is about fear, that we have a lot of fears, and yet what we do with fear is that we run away from it rather than look at it. We avoid it because it is unpleasant. We avoid it. And as a result, we don't know what fear is. So that's one. The second thing was awareness, that it is important to be aware without judgment, without condemnation, but just to be aware. And this thought was a crucial realization or insight for me. At that time, as I said, I was susceptible to severe depression. It was more of an existential depression, and not because I had problems with my money or love life or not. It wasn't.
It was an existential crisis, perhaps.
Right, like that. And when I get depressed, I would lie down, for example, in the evening, let's say 9 or 10 o'clock, and then at 4 o'clock morning, I would still not be asleep, sleepy and tired, but not yet asleep, simply because of this depressiveness. Then, after I read this book of Krishnamurti, one day I felt the depression coming again. And usually when I felt this coming, I would distract myself. I would turn on the radio, read something, do something, go out, and so on, just to distract and shoo it away. But on that morning, when I felt that the depression was coming again, I pulled my chair into the middle of the room of my dormitory and then sat there to really just be aware of my depression. Not to condemn it, not to welcome it, not to resist it, but just to watch what it was. And normally a depression lasts quite long, a day or so. And that morning, as I felt already feeling depressed, I sat down and tried to just be aware. What is this that I say depression? Then I watched it. And for the first time, I realized that to be depressed means to have no energy. I felt that from the head down to my waist, I had no energy. I had no motivation. I was ambitious, but I lost ambition. I wasn't even interested in anything, you know. So it was the lack of energy. So I just watched it, this energylessness. And you know, something happened. Within about 10 minutes of that sitting and being aware, the depression disappeared. It completely disappeared. I was no longer depressed. But what is more significant is that the depression never came back up to now. And this was what, uh, 40, 50 years ago. And I've never been depressed since that time. To think that I was battling depression in the usual way before that. And here I wasn't battling it, I was just watching it, and then no more. It never came back again. I was really quite amazed by that. Then I thought, all right, let me try it for fear. Because I had fears, as usual for 99% of people. Uh, One of my severe fears was heights. You know, if you ask me to walk through a bridge with a lot of slots where I can see the ground of the water, I wouldn't be able to walk. I'd be trembling and I'd have to crawl. My phobia was very severe, and I do not know how long ago it was. So what I did was that I went up to a tank tower, a water tank tower in a factory. I went up, which is about 3 stories high. And as I was going up, you know, I did not even know how I could climb up that water tower tank, knowing that I'm terrified by heights. But I went up. And, you know, in water tank tower, there is a railing around it where you can walk around it. And then when I started walking through the railing, you know, the railing in the side of the water tank tower It is made of metal slots, and you can see the ground underneath. And when I was walking, I really, like my legs became jelly. It became so soft, I couldn't even stand. I had to sit down. I was trembling, perspiring all over, and I couldn't walk. So I continued. I just watched myself. This time, I did not fight the fear. I just trembled and felt the fear. And after some time, I felt that, okay, my fear has stabilized. I stood up again. I was still trembling and shaking. My legs were still shaking, but I began to walk and felt myself shaking, just being aware of this trembling and shaking. And went around, once around, I was still shaking, and went around again. And I realized after some point, I was no longer shaking. I was walking quite normally. And I was looking down at the ground, and I wasn't trembling. In fact, I felt normal. Then I realized that my fear of heights seemed to have disappeared. And after that, since I was already feeling normal, I went down. Then I tried other buildings. I went to tall buildings. I went to the window, I went to the top and looked down, and I realized my fear of heights is gone. I tested it many times, you know, in some, what is this? Like there are parks, there are amusement parks where you have things like roller coasters or going into very high places and then you will just drop down and so on. I tried all those things, and uh, pictures were even taken of our faces when it drops, and I was smiling. I was smiling in those pictures. Then I realized how powerful it was, just simply being aware. Then I used it for my memories. All of us have painful memories in the past. And then there are things which I don't like to recall anymore in my life because they are painful. They are things that make me unhappy. So instead of avoiding them, I looked for them. I thought about them. And then whenever I think about it, then my body would tense. I would have a reaction. It's something unpleasant. And then I try to feel the unpleasantness. And after feeling it, the tension will begin to dissipate. I'm not trying to dissipate it. I was not trying to remove it. I was just watching it. Then it would normalize until when I think about it, no more. It's no longer something which bothers me or upsets me. I would think of another thing and another thing until there was no longer any memory left that upset me. Now, this was a very big thing because it means that I no longer detest my past, things that were happening, that happened, which I felt I wanted to avoid. No more. I can think about it and talk about it, and it's all right. This was when I realized the powerful transformative effect of awareness. Just awareness, not reflection, not contemplation, but simply awareness. And this, by the way, became the origin of the self-transformation seminar. And in later, when I started the program in the TS for schools, then this principle was a primary thing: freedom of thought, non-coercion, as well as development of self-awareness. So that
And,
was a life-changing experience through the Theosophical Society.
and through to Krishnamurti, basically, to that the small booklet of Krishnamurti, which was a trigger for this process of self-transformation, so
Yes.
profound that you went through.
Mhm.
And this awareness, Vic, would you describe it as the process of just being the here and now, without thoughts, without I found very interesting the way that you describe thoughts during your seminar at the European School of Theosophy. And I would like you to comment a little about that, because once we are talking about this very important process of awakening you went through, I think it would be important for you to describe or to explain what is exactly this process of awareness? How it happens?
I would probably describe it uh, in terms of a phrase which we might call peripheral awareness.
Mm-hmm.
The English word awareness can be equated with attention. Like, for example, I'm aware of the computer, I'm aware of your face facing me. So, all these kinds of are awareness, but these are normal awareness, thinking, perception, recognition, and so on. Now, this awareness, this other awareness, is a bit different. It is something that is not deliberately being created. In fact, if I'm thinking of something right now, there is a possibility of being aware that I am thinking. Now, this awareness in itself is something at the background. It is not the central activity of the mind. Because the central activity, like right now, I'm talking, but at the same time, we find that there is a possibility that while we are attentive and talking and thinking, there is at the same time a peripheral awareness, like a substratum of awareness. The surface has a mental activity, then on the substratum, which you oftentimes don't notice, there is also awareness. It is this one that is different. It is this one which, when it becomes more and more active, it is capable of transformation.
It would be like the observer observing the observer, something like that.
Well, um, the phrase observer being the observed is usually used for uh, the state of samadhi in yoga and yoga sutras. But this one is something which is more accessible. In other words, with meditation, when we do meditation, this this quality, this substratum, develops more and more. You know, it's like the penumbra. You know, in eclipse we have the penumbra.
Yes.
You also have the umbra. In other words, the periphery has a kind of shadow in it, as opposed to the central something. So in our consciousness, we also have that. I'm looking at something, I can be totally absorbed with that thing that I'm looking at, and then I'm nothing except that thing. If I'm looking at your face right now, then the content of my mind is nothing except your face. But on the other hand, after we practice to some degree meditation, this other substratum, this other peripheral awareness begins to grow imperceptibly. Day by day, it begins to grow. And then we begin to notice that in daily life, whenever something is happening, we notice that it is happening. Prior to that, we don't notice it, it just happens, and we just become that happening. Meaning, if I'm angry, I'm angry. If I'm fearful, I'm fearful. But this time, with this peripheral awareness, I'm still fearful, but I'm now aware that I'm fearful. And that is the one that makes a difference. And the
Mm.
thing is, this peripheral awareness, this substratum, is not active in the usual way that it is we are active in thinking. It just watches. It doesn't judge. It doesn't condemn. It doesn't do anything actually. It just watches, not intentionally, but it is there. And by the very fact that it is aware, something just naturally happens. Not because we intend it to happen, but it just happens. And as I said, the practical impact of this was quite enormous in my life. I'll give another example. I mentioned about depression, I mentioned about fear, memory, but there was something else. Normally, we, especially when we're young, we are susceptible to a lot of unhappinesses. We are unhappy because of many things. When we are anxious, when we are afraid, when we have been embarrassed, and so on and so forth. And whenever, for example, I feel humiliated, of course, I will feel really bad, and it may even cause a depression. But when there is this peripheral awareness, and I feel humiliated, I feel very bad, there's something else that is aware that I feel very bad. And that thing has its own transformative power, such that the feeling, when we stay with it, the feeling of humiliation begins to dissipate and actually disappears. It may be a few seconds, it may be a few minutes, it depends on the circumstance, but it actually disappears without us trying to make it disappear. And as a result of that, I try to use it on any negative experience I had. Suppose I'm bored, I'm waiting in a line, or I'm waiting for somebody, and I'm bored. And usually, when we're bored, we become restless. We're not positive anymore, we are not at peace anymore. And so, if I'm bored, let me be aware of my boredom, if there's awareness. And then later, no more. This boredom is not there anymore. The very awareness appears to dissipate the energy imbalance in our system that causes boredom, impatience, anger, irritability, and so on. It just dissipates. In other words, just like, if you observe a small toddler, a small child, when they cry, and after they cry, they're happy again. Just don't let them stop crying. The moment we let them stop crying and we say, don't cry, they will hold. And this energy doesn't flow. And for an hour or two, no more. They're no longer the cheerful, bubbly child. But when they cry, let them cry. And then this energy just flows and disappears. And they're cheerful and happy again. I've observed this very often because I have my grandchildren already. And I realized that what we call unhappiness is because we have this energy. Emotion means to move, to act. It's the energy. And when this moves, it will flow and dissipate eventually. But when we hold it back, it stays there. Then we become unhappy, not only for this moment, but after an hour, after one day. That's the reason why people who cry about something, after 10 years, they still cry about the same thing.
Yes, yes.
So whenever there is this awareness, we begin to, we begin, it acts on its own. It just dissipates. And I realize that any moment of unhappiness, whenever it is present, when I just try to be aware of it, it dissipates and disappears. And I realize that it is possible for us to be free of what is called human unhappiness. Meaning, it may come still, you may be sad, but no longer, you feel uncomfortable, you feel something,
Chained to the, yeah,
but you
chained,
are not
imprisoned. Yeah.
really unhappy.
Hmm.
For example, you may feel pain. Okay, there's pain. But are you unhappy? No, not necessarily. A person may be in pain and still be a happy person. Suppose a person feels upset and he feels low energy, a bit low. Then feeling that lowness, are you unhappy? Not necessarily. Because there's something else which is beyond this lowness, beyond this energy that is maybe pressing on your chest or on your stomach or your head. And this other one that is aware is not unhappy. And so when this peripheral awareness is present, then it opens up the possibility for us to be truly free of what is called unhappiness. It doesn't mean that the person is already happy, but at least one can be free of what is called unhappiness.
Yes. So Theosophy had such a transformative impact in your life, obviously, from what you were describing. You were also conducting, I think, a 5-month meditation seminar online. Is that so?
Not a 5 month meditation seminar. Well, you mean this week, this time?
I saw somewhere that there will be a 5-month something.
5 week.
Oh,
A five
5 weeks. Yes, sorry.
a 5 week seminar or
Yeah.
course on studying the Bible from an independent viewpoint. That's the
Okay.
title.
Okay. And you are still conducting your weekly meditation seminars?
Now monthly. I
Now
used to do it
monthly.
weekly, But
Yeah.
now every month, the first Sunday of every month, Philippine time at 3 p.m.
If anyone is interested to join, you will send me the information and I will include the link to the seminar if it's in
Oh, yeah.
English
It's in English.
below the video on YouTube. So anyone who wishes can join you. Now, what have you been doing during the pandemic, Vic? Of course, you are one of the most active Theosophists doing online activities. Every week we can see you there in the lectures and all that, very much like me now. I don't have weekends anymore since the pandemic started. So, but what have you been doing apart from the theosophical work? Do you have any hobbies? What do you do apart from the theosophical work, if you do anything in terms of hobby? Please, before answering, could you please show us a little your library, which is an amazing library, so that we can
Okay.
have a, yeah.
All right. This library
Yeah.
here. No. Okay.
Yes.
Like this. Okay. And then
Wow.
the second floor. I don't know whether you can see it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's
It
gigantic.
has a second floor. Let me see whether I can raise it
Yeah. If
up.
you have to raise the camera a bit. Yeah.
That's it.
There. We can see now. Yeah.
That's the second floor.
Wow. It's beautiful.
And right now, the shelves are full, and they are double layers.
How
Each
many books
shelf
do
has.
you have there?
I really
More
don't
or
know.
less?
I really don't know.
You don't know.
I really don't know because this just kept on accumulating through the years. And then I had to have somebody who would help me classify them. I tell them about the classification and they put numbers of each classification and put them in the in Excel file. So I really don't know. But in the past few years, after ebooks became popular, I have I have been reading. Probably 99% of my reading are through ebooks. You know, in physical books, normally I don't want to write much in a physical book because I'd like to keep it clean, and so I don't want to put notes and or put yellow markers. I don't want to spoil them.
Really? I love
Yeah,
doing that. Oh. Yeah.
because if somebody else is going to read, these kinds of notations can also become distracting.
Yeah, they will. They will
Yeah.
for sure.
Now, but when ebook became developed, I found that I could read faster with ebooks because I could change the font. You know, for example, in this book, look at the text. It's so small, and I'm not as young anymore in terms of my vision. And sometimes I would slow down. But in ebooks, I can change the size of the fonts. And so 99% of my reading now are ebooks. Either I
iBooks.
downloaded from Kindle or other things. And then I could put any kind of notation. I want to put comments and notes, drawings, red lines, and so on, because I can remove them anytime. And besides, for ebooks, nobody will read it anymore because it's my iPad or my phone or computer. And I realized that this was, to me, at least to me, a superior way of really studying because um, uh, I could study several books at the same time on my iPad or my computer and pick up those. In other words, I could do a lot of things which I could not do with physical books. So now I have another library, which is in my computers,
Which is the virtual one.
a virtual one. Yeah.
Yes. So, what type of books do you read? I apart from the classical theosophical works and Krishnamurti, is there any genre that you enjoy reading?
I like particularly books on religion, philosophy, and history. Aside from theosophical, spiritual, mystical books, I like those. Then I also read novels.
Oh, what kind
This
of novels?
I read. I read things like, for example, you know, uh, detective stories. One of my favorites since I was young was Sherlock Holmes.
Oh yeah.
Those type of, and then of course what are called thrillers. You know, things uh, um, about
Stephen King.
no, I don't read those things. I don't like horror.
It's a thriller sort of,
Yeah,
yeah.
thriller in terms of things that are happening. Like for example, Da Vinci Code,
Psychological. Uh,
Da Vinci Code. Those types of books.
okay.
They are. I like them. Of course, I read Harry Potter, all of them, and so on.
And the Lord of the Rings?
No, I did not read. I tried reading it. I got bored
Oh,
somewhere.
really? I thought.
Okay, maybe I'll
Yeah.
try it another time, but not for
Okay.
now.
Yeah. Do you know Blavatsky? She loved fiction. She was saying that, that fiction is the heart and pulse of people. And she was finding fiction a wonderful way to pass on spiritual, mystical, and theosophical ideas. And she published a number of fictions in the pages of Lucifer magazine. She was publishing them in installments. Every month, she would include a chapter of one book. And she was publishing some horror stories, very scary ones also. Her sister, Vera Jelikovsky, loved writing really scary stories. You cannot imagine. So yeah. Anyway, now moving forward to the second phase of our interview and to discussing about the present work, what's going on today in the theosophical world. What do you think, Vic, has been the most important contribution of the theosophical movement for the modern world today, in the 21st century?
Well, the 21st century is quite young. It's barely 20 years old. But I would rather look at the role of the Theosophical movement from a longer point of view, not in terms of 10 or 20 years, because I think this was the intention of introducing Theosophy to the world by the Mahatmas. My understanding of the introduction of Theosophy at the end of the 19th century was in order to open up new dimensions in inquiry, thinking, knowledge, and for humanity to become familiar with this in time. The Theosophical Society may be called, I don't know if this is an appropriate, like the leaven in a bread, the yeast in the bread. The yeast in itself would be a small thing, but it is the one that makes the bread really balloon and become big. So the Theosophical Society has done that. And in the 20th century, this type of thinking and inquiry and literature has grown so much that you don't even, people don't even associate the word theosophy anymore to these things. But it was the theosophical literature that started them all in a new spirit. In fact, who is this person who is been identified as a leader of the New Age movement? He says that Blavatsky was the mother, the real mother or grandmother of the New Age movement. And the 20th century is characterized by a different kind of thinking, a different kind of orientation, whether it's about religion or politics or about science. It's different. We are looking at things differently. And I believe that the Theosophical movement has done a lot of contributions to this. Um, I recall in two of the letters. One was by the Mahachohan, stating that the Theosophical Society will become the cornerstone of the future religions of humanity. Now, coming from a Mahachohan or from a Mahatma, I don't take this lightly. And I believe that there is a good reason for it. For example, religion of the future can no longer be dogmatic. Religious dogmatism can only flourish in a culture of ignorance. But when people become more intelligent, dogma has no place anymore. The search for truth must be done with freedom. In other words, suppose I'm a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Catholic, then I must look at Catholicism from an open mind. And then maybe out of, let's say, 20 dogmas, I may find that, okay, these three dogmas, these three teachings look all right. I would heartily embrace them and endorse them and teach them to other people. But the other 7 or 17, I have doubts about it. And when it is based on authoritarian dogmatism, religions become so enclosed and limited that it fails in its duty in encouraging people to find out about the truth. So the Theosophical movement will have eventually such an influence in the world about the way of thinking and inquiring into, for example, religion. I believe that one of the missions of Blavatsky, or maybe the Mahatmas, in launching the Theosophical ship was to initiate what we may call a religious reform. But this will take maybe centuries because humanity and education of people and the culture of people can still be so restrictive that an open inquiry into what is truth is not yet possible for many present cultures and societies. So it will take centuries or even millennia before it can happen. But these approaches of the Theosophical movement, when it comes to inquiry into truth, I think eventually will become the foundation of future religions in the world. So Theosophy has this role, but it cannot be visible in the short run because we are talking about development of civilization, of humanity, of cultures, which would change slowly, generation after generation, century after century.
Would you like some water? Please.
Let me see whether there's water here. No, it's okay. It's okay.
I can pause the interview if you would like to go to get some water. Would you like me to pause it?
No, it's all right. I'll ask somebody to bring a glass of water.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm okay. Go ahead.
Well, I think I found very interesting what you said, that you think that one of the main aims of the founders of the Theosophical Society and those who inspired them, behind them, the Mahatmas, was religious reform.
Pakitaan mo yung tubig. Yan, tubig, pakibigyan naman. Thank you. Okay, just ask for water.
Yes. I think the religious, now that we are republishing Lucifer magazine, this is very clear what you said, you know, that Blavatsky, she's emphasizing a lot the need of a religious reform, and she's defending free thinking and criticizing dogmatism in a way that is really very much emphasized throughout the years that she was the editor of Lucifer magazine. And so I couldn't agree more with you. I just think that perhaps the reform will it will take place earlier than what we think, because many religions are losing followers around the world, and they are understanding that they need to adapt their discourse and change their ways so that they can survive the modern times.
the Mahatmas themselves say so. The Mahatma Gautami says that one of their missions is to free humanity from the nightmare of religious superstition, including these anthropomorphic views of God, which has so engulfed the thinking of humanity for centuries or thousands of years, and which has caused a lot of division. A lot of division and conflicts.
Would you like to stop the interview and we do a second part, the second part in another date, perhaps? Are you not feeling
okay.
well?
Sometimes when my throat is dry, then it can become itchy. But after I drink some water, it will be all right.
Just drink your water, yes.
Okay. In my own observation, not only in the Philippines, but reading history, a lot of the conflicts in the world are based on cultures that have been influenced by religions. And so it will still take a long, long time before this can really become a kind of open society where there is freedom of inquiry in cultures. Then there will be more and more people who would be able to arrive closer to what is true, the real, as opposed to what people are asked to believe in. And the Theosophical Society, having been started more than 100 years ago, this kind of work is still in its infancy because we are dealing with changes in civilizations. But we should do our work. You know, this 5-week seminar that you are asking me about is actually about that one. In other words, I live in a Christian country, Philippines. I grew up a Catholic. And yet a lot of people believe, for example, the Bible without even having read it. They don't realize, for example, that there are 2 creation stories in Genesis that are not consistent with each other. They don't realize that there are qualities of God in the Old Testament that if they read about, they'll be shocked. That God make mistakes and God repents, and God can become very cruel. Because they have not read it, they just assume that it doesn't exist. And so it is important for people to become aware of this and be able to see that there are layers in understanding scriptures, whatever scriptures they are. The surface layer, where you take things literally, the deeper layers, where we begin to see wisdom in some parts of it and not in all parts of it. There may be symbolic things and other mystical insights, but most people look at it from the surface things, and that's what they are quarreling about. Look at what's happening between Protestants and Catholics for the past, 500 years. Wars in Europe have been waged, like the 30 Years' War, because of the conflict between Catholics and Protestants. And what's the point? Both are Christians. Why are you killing each other? So there is a lot of non-spiritual aspect in religion that really must go. And the fundamentalistic regard of the Bible as if they are the literal word of God, even that must go, because that is the source of conflicts and strifes for thousands of years.
Yes. This is very serious. For example, see the problems between India and Pakistan, which comes down also to not only politics but religion. Last time I was in Varanasi in 2019, I had a very, very interesting experience. I was with the drivers. They were taking me from the airport to the campus of the Theosophical Society in Varanasi. And there were some ongoing protests of Pakistanis or of Muslims in India. I don't know if you remember, 2019, they were all over the news. And then when I was seated in the back seat, There was a driver and his co-driver. They turned to me and said, "Madam, have you noticed the problems going on between India and Pakistan? Did you see that?" I said, "Yes." I said, "I'm not sure." And then they said, "Who do you support, Pakistan or India?" And I told them, what is it, Pakistan? I don't know. So there is this need to be taking positions, one against the other, or that one religion, or that one system, or that one people, they are better than the other. Um, and that I truly believe that, as you said, it will take quite a long time to change, isn't it?
And to think that Pakistanis were formerly Indians. They
I
were part
know,
of India.
I know,
And
I know,
it's just a name. In other words, they were still Muslims and others were still Hindus, but they were both Indians.
I
And
know, I know. And,
what's in
yeah, sorry,
what's in Go
sorry.
ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Now, moving forward, I would like, you have founded the Theosophical Digest magazine. And this was one of the first foreign magazines that came to my hand when I was a very young Theosophist, and I was fascinated about it. I was going around with the Theosophical Digest issue. I say, we need to do a magazine like that because it focused so much on self-growth, on self-knowledge, on self-transformation, on tips for us um, to deal with different problems in our life, becoming better persons. Is the Theosophical Digest is still printed? Is it printed monthly or bi-monthly? Could you mention something about that, please?
Quarterly. It is issued
Quarterly,
every
yeah,
quarter,
yeah.
and it was founded in 1989, and so it's now about 30 years. And it's being, we are going to circulate it as an e-magazine, but it's still being printed, particularly in India. And the idea about the magazine is this, very simple. There is a theosophy for maybe members or deep students of theosophy,
Mm,
but there's also theosophy for everybody. And theosophy cannot just be limited to scholars or to intellectuals,
mm,
but theosophy is about life, about living, about transformation, about inner peace, about love, about relationships, about
mm,
society. And there is no such, at the time, there was no such magazine or publication for the public.
mm.
And so this was the reason behind the Theosophical Digest. Let it be circulated, and then we don't put there technical things, meaning highfalutin theosophical dissertations, but rather things that the average person, whether they are members of the Theosophical Society or not, the average person can understand and appreciate. So it can be about health, it can be about relationships, it can be about anger, it can be about meditation, things that they can pick up and then learn from and apply. My
Yes,
view,
please go on. Yeah.
my view is that we have not, in the theosophical movement, whether the Theosophical Society or the Theosophical movement, we have not addressed this need to bring theosophy to the masses. We look at our publications. I do not know how many magazines we have. Suppose we have 30 magazines. How many of them are directed to the general public? If you can think of some, but when we were starting the Theosophical Digest, I could hardly think of anyone doing that. Now, later, Quest magazine went public in the United States. And then in Brazil later, they also published Theosopia, which is also for the public. Now, except that those colored magazines became very expensive and very hard to sustain. So what we did with the Theosophical Digest, keep it simple. No frills, no colors except for the cover. Illustrations are simple. And the purpose of reading the Theosophical Digest is simply because of its content and not because it's a beautifully colored design magazine. And so we just adopted the, uh, the format of the Reader's Digest, which is allowed to do so. And so, so it has lasted for about 30 years already. Now, I believe that we should do more of this. We should, in not only in the English language, but in all languages, bring out a public magazine in order to reach more people. Whether they become members of the Theosophical Society is not important, but that they are able to gain insight from theosophical ideas would be helpful. So this is the idea behind the Theosophical Digest.
Yes, and that's what I found so special about the Theosophical Digest, which was something non-technical, which was something that had to do with our everyday life, very practical, full of tips, many tips, you know. And I found it. I was an adolescent at the time. It was my precious. So I would like to mention regarding magazines, as you know, we are republishing the Lucifer collection. We are printing it into topics. I am supposed to send you the catalog. I didn't send you yet because we want to finish the Blavatsky years. Which is from 1887 to 1891. And I have been, this work is magical because I am I'm diving into the way they were working in the 19th century, early 19th century. It's something that I saw that Madame Blavatsky was doing in Lucifer, and we don't see it anymore across the Theosophical magazines. Two things. One, Blavatsky had a session on mystic and Theosophical magazines, in which she would publish reviews, even one small paragraph saying the magazine in Spain published this very interesting article, and the magazine. So there was, it would give us an overview about what the different Theosophical magazines across the world were publishing. At least one article they would refer. So we do not see something like this going on today. We do not know why, for example, what within the Theosophical Society, for example, what the different magazines across different Theosophical sections are publishing, because we do not have that magazine review session anymore, which I found it magical. And also they were reviewing magazines which were non-theosophical but focusing on mysticism and all that. Another work, very interesting, Vic, I would like to share with you, they were doing in Lucifer, is book reviews. They were reviewing books that it wasn't a work self-centered into the classics of theosophy, or only what someone would write in quoting HPB or quoting classical theosophists. It was very open. The early theosophists, 19th century theosophists, they would review books on fiction. They would review books on personal growth, on self-knowledge, on mysticism, on religion. So there was this sort of dialogue going on across different social areas, magazines, books, publications, that we do not see happening today also. And just to close my comment, as you mentioned that with the Theosophical Digest magazine, for you it was important to do something financially accessible and practical, because even the size, it's so practical to read. Just yesterday, I was reading the Theosophical work around the world in 1887 from Lucifer. And they decided to create a circular library, because they said many members, they have no money to buy books. So Countess Weissmaster was responsible for that work, and then they created a lending library at the time in which they would post a book for someone who could not buy it, and the person would mail the book back. So it was an amazing work. They were doing really a great work. I think that we have a lot to learn from them. What do you think?
Well, yeah, that is great work. Certainly, especially during the time. Today, the world has changed,
Mm.
and you can send thousands of books to anybody around the world through email. You can buy books from Amazon and from Apple and so on. And many of these books are quite inexpensive.
Yeah.
So this kind of work has become more accessible to many people.
Yeah.
Now, what is remarkable during the time of Blavatsky was this. Blavatsky was engaging with the rest of the world.
Yes.
She would write to newspapers, she would write to magazines, debate with them, answer their comments, and so on. In other words, she was interacting with the rest of the world. After that, maybe Besant did the same thing, especially during the political period where she was involved in India. She was very much public, and she was even publishing newspapers. But after that, no more. Our activities became internal, became within organizations, whether the TS or the sister organizations elsewhere. We became absorbed with ourselves,
Yes.
no longer with the world. And I feel that this must be reversed in the future
Yes.
because, for example, Blavatsky has mentioned that if she had the money, but if the TS had the money, she would put up schools where children are free, altruistic, and so on and so forth. So that was a very clear statement about the role of education. And in the early years of the Theosophical Society, schools were put up by Olcott, by Besant. But after that, they disappeared. And right now in India, practically the only one left was the Olcott School, and maybe a few which were turned over to the government of India. And so our work in education, which is for the public, again got lost. And we must do something along this line. We must not simply teach theosophy as technical theosophy, but wisdom in living, which is what should make our schools different from an average school, from the ordinary school. And we can do this. And so I'm very glad that in the case of Tim, he has agreed very much on this. And so after some discussion, we decided to put up a new school in India, and that's the Adhyar Theosophical Academy, which we hope will become like a yeast that would leaven the educational effort along theosophical lines in the future. And I
Yeah.
believe that we should devote time to this because we are truly influencing not just old people, adults, but young minds. There is a principle which I have learned in life. When young people, when people grow up with a closed mind, it's almost impossible to open them. But when young people's mind become open when they are young, it's almost impossible to close them.
Yeah.
And part of the work of the Theosophical Society should be to be able to help nurture young people who will have such open-mindedness as they grow up. It doesn't mean that they need to believe in theosophy, become theosophists. No, wherever they are, in whatever religion they belong to, let them be open-minded and be objective about what is, in their quest for truth.
Yes, open-mindedness is, I think it's a virtue, Vic. Do you think someone can become open-minded? Do you think you can teach someone becoming open-minded to become
Or
open-minded? Or is open-mindedness a virtue?
I'll tell you about our experience in Golden Link because we teach comparative religion, theosophy, self-transformation in golden link. The Philippines is a very Catholic country, and we have also a lot of born again Christians and so on. And so we get a lot of students who have that kind of cultural background. They are very sometimes fundamentalistic, and they just believe whatever their religions believe. When they enter the Golden Link College, they get they get they get a shock of their life when things are openly discussed, questions are openly asked, and we do not answer them. I teach some of these subjects like comparative religion, theosophy, and so on. I don't ask them to believe in anything, but only to be able to ask clearly. Like, for example, when it comes to religion, then we ask about, all right, um, what is our understanding of God? Is God somebody who makes mistakes and who repents? And they would normally say, as any young person would say, no, if he's God, he cannot make mistakes. However, in the Bible, it says that God makes mistakes and he repents many, many times, not just once. What do you think? This will shock them to discover that the Bible says that. And what do? If they say, I can't accept that, then they are saying that they cannot accept parts of the Bible. If they say that I believe in the Bible, then they have to say that God also makes mistakes. They get into a quandary. They have to sort these things out, not because we tell them, but because they think about it. And through the process of these kinds of interactions, these kinds of classes, I've seen the development of open-mindedness in them. We have, for example, a a girl who was so fundamentalistic that when she entered the college, she wanted to convert every student into her religion. And when she wasn't very successful, she wanted to leave the school now because she wasn't successful in converting others to her religion. Then, when we studied now, because we have a subject called comparative religion, when she took that subject, and then they all presented various religions, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, and so on. At the end of the course, somebody asked, if you were to choose your religion, what religion would you choose? Everybody was asked. And you know what her answer was? She said, if I were to choose my religion, I would choose Christianity and Hinduism. Oh, that was something which was,
That's very interesting. Yeah.
yeah, for somebody to say that you would choose a second religion that is not Christianity, and especially Hinduism. Here is a person who's no longer so close-minded as to
Yes.
think that his or her religion is the only true one. And we did not ask her to believe in anything. It is just her own conclusion and her own reflection, and he arrived on that. Now, such a person will no longer be intolerant about other religions. They will no longer condemn other people for their own religions.
Mhm.
For anybody to appreciate two religions just means that they'll be open to other religions. They will
Yeah.
see the mistakes of many teachings of many religions, but no longer intolerant about them.
Yeah. I was meaning to ask you about the Golden Link School.
Mhm.
It's going to be three questions. First, when did you found it? Second, how many students do you have? Third, what is the methodology you implemented? For instance, for example, in the Waldorf schools of Rudolf Steiner, it involves a threefold learning process, engaging head, heart, and hands. Or thinking, feeling, and doing. They also do not allow, for example, all the material, everything used in the school, the desks, the chairs, they have to be of natural material. They cannot be artificial, plastic, anything. They do not use anything of the kind. This is part of their methodology and more. And there is also the Montessori schools, for example, in which they give teaching self-directed, um, And it's a lot of playing in the process of learning, and with, of course, a very experienced and trained teacher to guide them. I studied when I was small for some years in a Montessori school. You could even draw in the walls. You had a freedom, an incredible amount of freedom to express your creativity. Um, 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 the Krishnamurti schools also, they have a methodology of its own, which is strongly opposed to rigid, training in which you have to wear uniforms and you have to do this and that and the other. So how could you describe the methodology you are using in the Golden Link School, when it was founded, and how many students do you have?
First, on the question of when it was founded, I have to say that the Golden Link is the third school that we put up, not the first one.
Okay.
The first one is called Sunshine Learning Center, which was a kindergarten school established probably 10 or 20 years earlier than Golden Link College. So we had that, and it went on. Up to now, it's still there. So it's been already 30 or even longer, more years. I already forgot. Then after that, we put up a community school in the northern part of Metro Manila for poor people. And the tuition was almost nothing. And the principle, we started already during those times, even for kindergarten, basic principles. Number one, no competition, no ranking, no anger, no threat, no use of fear. So these basic principles. Then after that, when we put up the second school, many parents were asking, do you have grade school? Because if they finish from our school in kindergarten, they have to move on to the public school or for other schools. And they like how we teach their children. And so for a period of 3 years, we had to look for a property nearby in order to put up a grade school. And it was very fortunate that I had as a co-worker on this a UN volunteer from Bangladesh. Her name is Reka Nahar. And then she was the one who assisted me in looking for a place and putting up this third school, the Golden Link. We started with kindergarten again, then grade 1, grade 2, and so on. And now it's up to college. And after that, we opened a branch in Bohol, which is in the southern part of the Philippines, which is now up to high school this coming school year. And then 2 other schools of members of the Theosophical Society were put up, where we oversee how the curriculum and the methodology that they use. So we have now a total of 6 schools in the Philippines. And what's the methodology that we use? Offhand, we may say that the fundamental methodology is very commonsensical. It is not based on any kind of esoteric view about the nature of human being. Of course, we have a lot of insight on psychology, not only of children but also of adults, from Theosophy and other similar traditions. But the concept is quite straightforward, commonsensical, and not too highfalutin, not too complicated. For example, children, standard schools would be very strict with their discipline. Don't do this, don't do that. If you do that, you will be punished. You'll be made to stand. We don't want that. Now, a lot of parents will worry, if you are not disciplining children by punishing them, how can you create discipline in them? That's the usual thinking of parents. But from my own experience with my own children and my grandchildren, you don't need to punish in order to make children become well-behaved children. When children are happy, when you do not lie to them, when they are enjoying what they're doing, you know what will happen? You tell them, don't play with this because this is breakable. Because if it breaks, you cannot put it up anymore. But this one is not breakable. If it falls down on the ground, it's all right. But this one is breakable. You know, they will believe you, and they will not play with this one anymore. And they will, my grandchildren would usually tell me, that is breakable. So he will not play with it. He knows what is breakable and not breakable. When children are happy, and they respect the elder, like parents or teachers, just tell them they will follow you. Not because they're afraid, but simply because they believe you and they respect you. That's the reason why, in parenting as well as in education, I always tell all parents who attend our seminars and the trainings of teachers, never, never lie to children. The moment they discover that you are untruthful, they now cannot take your word as factual. And that's the beginning of the problem. So, no fear, no ranking. Ranking and comparison are very harmful. If I have four children, I would say, oh, you are the best among the four of you. You're the second, you're the third, you're the fourth. If ranking is good, I should do that to my children. Would that be good? No, I'm going to really mess up the life of my children if I do that regularly with my children saying, you're the best, you're the worst. So if that doesn't work in the family, why do we do it in school? So what we do is that no ranking. Allow the child to learn, to have the opportunity to learn as much as possible in a spirit of openness, in a spirit of encouragement, enthusiasm, and so on. So whenever we have, for example, speech program, we don't, in our school, in my time, what happens is that if we are 400 students, each grade level would send a representative, and then we will do a contest, and there will be a gold medalist, silver medalist, a bronze medalist. And if you lose in the contest, you'll feel embarrassed. Suppose you don't get any medal, you'll feel embarrassed, even though that was the best speech you ever did in your life. And the ones who are second or third place will feel a bit embarrassed because they not get the gold medal. All these complications. So in Golden Link, we don't do that. Whenever we have a speech program, we ask everybody from nursery to college to go to the stage and deliver a speech. We teach them how to remove their fear. We teach them how to pronounce words. We teach them how to stand and gesture and so on. And they do their best. And whatever is their best, we applaud and appreciate them. And the effect on them is tremendous. They develop self-confidence because they're not being judged. They're not being compared to other people. There are no winners and no losers. And every year for the past 20 years, we do that. That's why in our graduation exercise, whenever we have graduation ceremonies, usually in schools, there is only one speaker, the valedictorian. He delivers the valedictorian address, and the others are just there watching and receiving their diplomas. In Golden Link, no. Everybody delivers a valedictory speech. They will all be giving speech during the graduation exercise, and it's not just the best student or what. And we don't have gold medalists, we have no first honor, and so on. And so they don't feel as if their worth is in comparison with other people. Now, this is very important because when we go out and live in our professional life, a person who is competitive would always think that, oh, if I join this company, I must be the best. Here is a person who is very good, I must be better than them. And it becomes now a conflict and competition, even in work. But life is not like that. Life is not a competition with other people. It is just becoming your best. I cannot become like an Einstein if I take up science. I'll never probably be able to, even if I have two lifetimes. But why should I become like Einstein? Let me be the best that I can be as a science student, a scientist, or whatever. And there may be scientists who are less competent than I am, but there are those who are more competent. Why should I compare myself with them? Let me be what I can be. It is part of the philosophy of life about what living is. And the usual standard view about education and social career is based on comparison and competition. That's the reason why, in Japan, in Japan, every year, every September 1, two things happen. September 1 is the first day of classes in the whole of Japan. September 1 also is the day of the highest rate of suicide among students. September 1. In other words, they're horrified by school. Rather than be excited that, wow, I'm going to learn something new, they are afraid of school and they commit suicide. There are 2 dates in Japan which there would be a peak in their suicide rate. The first is September 1, and the second is after the winter break. They go back to school after the summer break and the winter break. Those are the 2 dates where there is a peak in their suicide rates. Now, what is happening? Are we developing young people just to become like, people in the rat race? Or do you want them to become people who feel fulfilled and happy and good people of good character, rather than become cogs in a large social machine?
Yeah.
So Golden Link, behind it, is a philosophy about living. But it is not something that is based on some esoteric thing, but something commonsensical. Example, do we want our children to become happy? I ask parents, if there are 5 qualities you'd like your children to be, would happiness be one of them? All of them would say yes. But is happiness being taught in school? No. So what's wrong? If this is really important, shouldn't we try to nurture them to become happy people? And yet students are committing suicide when it comes to schooling. In India, the Times of India said there is 1 student every hour in India who commits suicide because they have failing grade, they didn't do well in entrance exam, and so on. And in Hong Kong, the same thing. In Korea, the same thing. In China, the same thing. Something's wrong. Something's wrong.
I agree
So,
with you. I agree with you, Vic. Yeah. And I was thinking, for example, we have adopted a child recently, and then we went through a very, very narrow filter in which we had 1 year social workers coming, psychologists visiting us twice, sometimes 3 times per week. And then I was thinking, why the schools do not teach people how to be parents also? The importance of parenthood is something that people, they do not learn in school. The importance of being happy, self-knowledge, meditation, all that. And then I find fantastic the work that you were doing with the Golden Link and all that you described. I found that so important. I have so many questions to ask. We would be 4 hours here talking about all that. So
by
we
the
are
way,
gonna, yes,
by the
please.
way, we have added marriage and parenting as a required subject in our college. For all students, whoever enrolls, they have on their 4th year before they graduate, they have to go through 1 semester of marriage and parenting. I agree with you.
Yeah.
This is absolutely necessary because a lot of the unhappiness of people is because of bad parenting.
Yes, I know this was, I thought I had during the process of adoption. I was thinking, look, I learned a lot with the social workers. Of course, I have also a degree in social psychology, so that those things are not foreign to me. But then I was thinking, we are going through such a strict training process. Why we do not learn, how to raise a child from school, which is the most important thing? One of the, how to raise a child. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. We have to move forward now because
Okay.
I have a few more questions to ask for you that we could be actually until tomorrow morning talk about all that. Now, it's regarding publications. You have done an amazing work. You are inspiration for many, for me also, because I'm also very interested in in publications. You had done an amazing work with publications. You have published the Mahatma Letters in chronological order, which is, very important work. You have started the Theosophical Encyclopaedia, which is now online, but you have created this work that I want to share now. Also, oops, not here. Here.
Okay.
Let me.
Yes.
The Theosophical Classics.
Yeah.
This is an amazing work, Vicky. Well, me at my university, I'm doing a Master of Research dissertation focusing on Blavatsky. And I know many scholars also that they use this material. And not only scholars, Theosophists. This is an amazing tool for research on the works, The Secret Doctrine, Isis Unveiled, Collected Writings, the Mahatma Letters, to A.P. Sinnett. There is a lot of work here. I'm not going to mention all of them now because of time. Now, if you want, we can discuss about the possibility of even including the entire Lucifer collection if you would like to expand it, because we have it in a format that could be used also. So my question is, do you plan to keep on updating Theosophical Classics and keep on sharing, making this available to the public? It was difficult for me to get a new copy that would be compatible with my computer. I remember I had to contact you and all that. And not a lot of people know about the Theosophical Classics. So what are your plans regarding that, Vic?
Well, the software used in that is a very good one, actually produced by Microsoft. But they stopped upgrading it already. And when Microsoft went to Windows 10, we had a problem about compatibility of this software plus Windows 10. Fortunately, there is a group of Theosophists in England who assisted us in upgrading this to make it compatible with Windows 10. So it's now still working. And hopefully even with Windows 11, 12, 14, or whatever, it will still work. So far, among the softwares that I have tried and used, this one was simply the best, because the searching is instant, because it is all pre-indexed. It doesn't search whenever you put a word. It doesn't search at that time, but it's already pre-indexed for every single word in all the, that's a total of more than 20 volumes, because the collected writings is 15 volumes. And it's very fast, and you can select which book you will search. So it was really very good. I am trying to see what new softwares would be available that would have this kind of capability. Right now, I couldn't find. I wouldn't want to go and start a whole programming an entirely new software. I wouldn't have the time for that, nor the skill for that. And so, for example, you can have the entire Theosophical Classics in PDF form. It's possible. But then you'll have to do search according to PDF, which would be very, very slow compared to what we already have. And then the production of the search result would be different. And it's not like you choose which one you'd like to read. In PDF, you'll have to do it one by one. If there are 1,000 citations there, you'll have to go from 1 to 1,000. So far, it's the best one. Will it become outdated? That one I cannot answer. I hope that even when Windows upgrades to Windows 20, the software can still be adjusted to be able to adapt to that.
Hopefully, because it's very important. It's the best thing out there. Yeah, in terms of research. Up to, it's. I love it. Yeah.
Yes.
Now we are reaching the end, towards the end of our interview. We have to run a bit because we're almost 2 hours talking. So I have 2 more questions to close the interview. So the final one, the final question, and then general one. So many people, Vic, are searching for inspiration, spirituality, something that may lead them to spiritual awakening. Many of them, they become very disappointed actually in their journey because they project onto other people what they are trying to find. They project their expectations, and they understand that their expectations is not compatible with some spiritual leaders or writers, whatever. So how difficult is, in your opinion, for someone to realize that they need to become what they seek?
For them to realize that they need to become what they seek.
That spiritual, because many of them are searching for gurus, and they create a psychological dependence on that, and they become very frustrated, and then they abandon everything. And I think that the idea of self-centered transformation is that perhaps the first process of awakening is understanding that you have to become that which you are seeking.
My understanding of human growth, not just spiritual growth, but human growth, is that we are all in various stages of life. Only a few percentage of people are in what we may call the spiritual stage of life. In order to reach that, a certain thing must be awakened in them. In India, we call it prajna, intuition, or an existential insight about life. For those who don't have this yet, then they're not interested in spirituality. They'll be interested in careers, they'll be interested in growth, social growth, politics, and so on, or science, but not spirituality. And in that case, there's no point in trying to push them to go the spiritual path, because in order to go into the spiritual path, we must within us have a corresponding thing that will respond to that one. In other words, before I can see things, I must have eyes. Without my eyes, you tell me about things that you are seeing, it's pointless to me because I don't have the eyes to see. So in spirituality, it's the same thing. Now, the spiritual teachers, many of them are addressing the concerns of those who have this faculty already partly awakened. And then they become helpful guides. Whether their writings, their talks, their teachings, they become helpful guides. Uh, so let me just, I'm talking about now two stages. One is the ordinary stage, and we must not say that just because they are not on the spiritual stage, we must no longer be interested in them. We should, because growth is growth, whether it is from primitive stage, ignorance, stage of ignorance, civilized stage, intellectual stage, or what. They're part of the growth. Without going through it, we cannot reach spirituality. And therefore, we must be concerned about growth of human beings on all levels. That's the reason why education is part of our work, because we are preparing them such that when once they are ready for the higher level, they are prepared, because they have not been developing personality traits that are contrary to that which they will become in the future. So that's on the ordinary phase. On the spiritual path, on the other hand, my understanding is this: it is inevitable that people will have to do their own search. The only people who no longer need to search are those who have done the search in previous lives, and they already know what they're looking for. In other words, they will be born spiritually mature in this life, and they will be able to identify, okay, this is not the genuine thing, this is a genuine thing. Some people can easily see that even when they're young. and they are spiritually mature people. But for those others where the awakening process has just begun or in its early stage, they have to go and search. They feel this existential emptiness and say that, I can be a billionaire and yet it may not mean much to me. I can be a president of a country or prime minister and yet what's the point? When they begin asking that, then they'll begin to search. And in their search, they will come into 1, 2, 10 schools of thoughts, 10 teachers, and then in the process, they will learn about what is spiritually authentic and what is not spiritually authentic. Things that may be wonderful but psychical, whereas other things that don't look amazing and yet they are truly spiritual. It will take time for them to go through this with trial and error until somehow it's clear already to them that, all right, there is this important distinction between spirituality and other things. And what would be the role of teachers or movements like the Theosophical movements, the Theosophical Society, or Theosophical writers and speakers? It is to make available these things as widely as possible. To me, our task is to sow the seeds. It's not to convert people, because you can only, what is called conversion is can be superficial or real. Superficial conversion is I convince you that, okay, you become a Catholic or you become a Protestant or you become a Theosophist, and you believe me and you become a Catholic. That's superficial conversion. Real conversion is when you begin to realize that this is this is the more real thing in life. You really understood it, have insight about it, then you go into it. So how do we come about that? It is when, for example, like in my case, I was searching, I was confused. Then I come across an unknown book called Life Ahead by Krishnamurti. And then when I read it, then bam, something happens. And then uh, it became a turning point in my life. So books like those, it can be Light on the Path, it can be Key to Theosophy, it can be any other book, not necessarily a theosophical book. It can become a turning point in the lives of people. So what is our task? If we believe that there are some insights, teachings that we have which will be helpful, make them available, circulate them as widely as possible. And this is the reason why I believe that our work should be addressed to the public, not just to members. We have just a few tens of thousand members in the world, but there are 7 billion people in the world. So we should address, those 7 billion, those who feel that they're ready for some of these things. And whether they become members of the Theosophical Society is not important, but that we help somehow, they will be able to pick up a gem, and then because of that, their life changed for the better. That is our work. So our work is to disseminate, sow the seed. Whether the Theosophical Society or theosophical groups grow as an organization or not is less important. But that the work of the Theosophical movement should make available these things. That's the reason why, before it's more expensive to print books. But now it costs almost nothing to duplicate books in the internet and make it available to as many people as possible. So what is called the playing field has been leveled, meaning what the Barnes and Nobles can do, I can also do, we can also do. Before, it's impossible. You need to have huge capital to do this, but now no need. You can do it free from through Facebook, YouTube, website, and so on. Before, it's impossible. You need millions of dollars for advertising.
Yeah.
So now our task is make things available,
Yeah.
and then it will help people at the various stages of growth.
Yeah, still keeping in mind, of course, that there are a lot of people that have no computer in many countries, and are very poor, and printing material and making it available to them somehow is also important.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Vic, for such a wonderful conversation. I think we could be talking 1 week. or more
Yeah.
about, because I have so many more questions to ask and comments to make. But we have to close. We are 2 hours almost here. Now,
Mm.
I would like to ask you, is there anything else would you like to say before we close this our meeting?
But simply that perhaps a first thing is that it's our task to grow ourselves, meaning we as active members of the Theosophical Society, I believe that our first duty is to grow ourselves. We are imperfect, but to the extent that we can, we grow. And when we find that there are genuine insights and we find that it is not harmful, but truly helpful, then the next step is to make it available to other people, just sow the seeds. As to the fruits and the results, it's somewhat beyond our control. The most that we can do is to do our best. Whether we write, we speak, we print books, we print magazines, and so on. But we do our best. Write articles in ways that people will understand and appreciate rather than write articles that are really difficult to understand and can reach only a very small group. So we try to make it more available to people. And so that's all that we can do, the best thing that we can do. And this work is not simply about 100 years, or I believe we're talking about thousands of years of work. And when we come back in another life, Erica will still be part of that work and will still be complaining about the problems of the world, even after a few thousand years. But that's all right, because that's the nature of the universe, that's the nature of existence. And no point in complaining about it, but we do our best in order to lessen the suffering of people. Because there's only one problem in this whole wide world, and that is suffering. Stones don't suffer, there's no problem of stones. So human beings and sentient people suffer. They become unhappy, they feel pain. And we have to do something in order to lessen the suffering and be able to bring about inner peace and harmony and love and, if you like, joy and happiness in the lives of people. Plus, of course, spiritual advancement and uh, raising of our consciousness to the higher and higher levels. But at least if we are able to diminish the suffering and happiness in this world, I think we would make this world a better place in our own small ways. So we just do our best.
Thank you so much, Vic. It has been a wonderful interview. I'm so glad and honored to have had you here with us. Thank you for everyone watching this. And we will be back in a month from now with an interview with Pedro Oliveira talking about his book, Annie Besant in India. Thank you so much, Vic.
Thank you
I
very
wish
much,
you a
Erica.
nice week. And please send me all the links also for the software and for the Theosophical Digest, so I can include below the interview, and to the Golden Schools, the Golden Link schools and other schools in Philippines, and also for the school in Adyar. So I can include all these links below our interview, and whoever is interested, they can go on by themselves and get more information. Thank you so much. And I
Okay.
wish you a wonderful week.
Thanks.